Oh my God, this is nice turnout. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. And it's great to see you all here tonight.
Indeed, thank you all for being here. We're very excited to have a talk this evening about unlocking the wealth in your walls.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of real estate clients through the years, friends, colleagues, a lot of people who've built up a lot of equity in their homes. And maybe they're not quite sure of like how to use the potential of what they have and the best ways to reinvest.
Yeah, so with everything going on in the world today, with high interest rates for sure, but the higher cost of living, talk of recession, Trump tariffs, whatever else that's going on to plague us, as well as just the challenges that young people face with regard to affordability. We thought this an opportune time to open a discussion about what people could do with the equity they've built up in their homes and what they could do to perhaps make use of that equity in a better way.
And we've had a lot of clients already extract some equity to help their children to purchase a home, or maybe they've downsized from a large home and they now have a much smaller property and they can reuse the rest of the income, the equity from the sale, to live very comfortably for the rest of their lives. And
so to explore that further, we're thrilled to introduce Cliff Rego, broker and owner of Corcoran Horizon Realty here in Toronto, Canada. And I thought maybe just to start the evening off, Cliff, maybe you'd like to tell us the story of how you brought Corcoran to Toronto and really
and
to
why?
Canada, because
Why?
Why?
And how do you want your investment in order to afford it?
Yeah.
so welcome, Cliff, and thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you. And I have a lot of respect for Anita and Norman, and great night. Thanks for attending. I mean, I built my business very similar to this. It was always like 3-4 people would come out and learn how to invest in real estate like 23 years ago. And I respect Anita and Norm doing this and you guys coming out, because a lot of people want to do things, but they don't reach out, they don't network, they don't come to events. There's always, and one thing I always say is we never sell any books. We're not selling it. You're not going to walk out here with like a $10,000 event or any of that. Like, and I'm so happy that Norman and Anita took advantage of some of my experience and what we do, and just bring out people and let's have conversations, Q&A, because I mean, every day things are changing and pivoting, and all I do is I share a lot of stories based on facts and stats and past clients. I've been very fortunate to be in the business. I haven't worked a day in my life over 35 years. I came from men's clothing, then got into the real estate, and I haven't worked a day in my life for the last 23 years in this business. But one thing I can tell you is what my passion is. I can't believe how many people I've helped build wealth through real estate without even realizing that it was kind of something that I brought a lot of value, and only because I had so many mentors teaching me how they did it. And I would just run around and do it myself, and I'd refinance, so I just go around and sharing the story. So thanks for coming out today. And then Corcoran. So I've been in the business a very long time. 5-6 years ago, I started to get bored. We're really based out of the Waterloo region. That's where I was kind of started and created my business. I was always in Toronto. Yorkville was always my backyard. Friends of mine own salons on Cumberland, and I was here all the time. And played a lot of soccer. A lot of my friends are in the men's clothing, so a lot of that network. So finally, I did say I had a brand, and I didn't want to scale my company. I just felt like it wasn't the right brand, and just didn't want to do that. And I shopped for about 5-6 years across North America and looked for brands. I'm like, how do I scale what I like to do, teach what I've done for 20 years, pass it on to great talent, lots of experience, very loyal people, customer oriented. There's amazing agents in the industry, and I thought there has to be this brand that thinks like I do and has this. So anyway, I shopped and I connected with Corcoran. They got a hold of me after 5-6 years. I said no to a bunch of brands, and then I had an aha moment. I flew to New York. And when I realized how powerful Corcoran was in Manhattan, like they literally dominated that new dev space for over 50 years. Central Tower, tallest residential tower in the world, Hudson Yards, Steinways, and they dominate residential resale. So they had like 2 massive divisions, and I was like, this is a humble company. I was so impressed how powerful they were and how humble they were, and they were all about people first. And when I heard that, I'm like, people as customers, people as agents, and they bring knowledge in their marketing background, and it was like, fresher breath there, and it's what I talk about. And I love bringing value to clients and agents. And so I said, yeah, let's go. I said, I have 20 years in me. I just wanna do it again and scale it across Ontario. So I bought the rights in Ontario, and we had to set shop in the best location in this province/country, and we shopped for a bit and chose this location, and it's a stomping ground. And now we have agents in Oakville, Hamilton. We have a few agents, quite a few in Muskoka, doing really well. So it's organic growth. We don't hire every single agent. It's the right agent that's looking forward to nights like this, bringing customers value and investing into their business. So that's why the brand is the right brand for that. They're now in 33 countries. They've just announced Portugal. They're in Italy, Cayman Islands, Turks, St. Bart's, British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Florida, all of California. They started franchising in 2020, and now they have 33 dots all over the world. So it's exciting. Yeah, great brand, very marketing focused, fresh, and that's why we did it. And I'm blessed to be around some amazing talent. Adrian is our broker manager out here, and we're having lots of fun. So thanks for coming out.
Thank you. And so moving into the investment world then, and we were thinking, if you were to talk to somebody who's getting on in life, such as myself, who maybe has some equity built up in their homes, what would you say to them right now, especially in this maybe financially challenging time?
That's a good question. The problem with me, I'm going to not follow the slides now. It's done. Because you just asked the question that I'm going to answer this way. How I've been answering the last 3 to 5 years. And you've asked in your situation, maybe your time in life, your situation, I'd say sell your principal asset. And a lot of people get quiet. A principal asset is a liability, not an asset. Your principal home, is a liability, not an asset. A lot of people don't want to say that, especially real estate agents. So I would say sell your home and go rent right away.
I was shocked when I first heard Cliff say that. I'm like, are you serious? But
Yeah.
but then you talked us
Then I'll go
through
deeper.
it.
Yeah, and you're right. But then I've had so many people ask me, Cliff, good friends of mine and everyone, like, what should I do? Do I invest in real estate? And then I have to ask a few more questions. I need to understand your risk tolerance. I need to understand your plan. What's your goal? What's your target? Are you a passive income? Do you want appreciation? Do you have a long-term play? Like, a principal home is so important still. I'll say that and I get everyone's attention. It's a fact, but it's not for everyone. I haven't done that yet, but I will. But I know a lot of people have hundreds of properties as investments, and they rent their property, their principal residence. And there's a couple of reasons. Quick math is if you own a $2 million asset or $1 million principal home, and it's free and clear. If you look at that, how much money are you making off of that principal?
Not a lot.
It's costing you.
You're losing about $100,000 a year, $120,000 a year. Because the cost of opportunity, you take $1 million, invest in a GIC, you make $50,000 passively right away, 5%. It's dropped a bit. But if you get 5% return on $1 million, it's $50,000. If I'm off by my math, let me know. But in around $50,000, 10% would be $150,000. And you're renting for $50,000, you're breaking even. Right now, you're not making $50,000 and you're spending $50,000 to $100,000 on your principal home. A roof, asphalt driveway, a deck, snowblower, the gas is out on the snowblower, the weeds, the garden, the landscape, it goes on and on and on. A principal, the roof.
Minus the rent you pay for the place you live.
Yeah, like if you're renting and you're making money, it's kind of a wash. But if you own your principal home and you have no mortgage on it, you're paying taxes, insurance, maintenance, is all that. So it's very expensive. So that's why I've said this forever, and I have in the last, well, not forever, the last 3-4 years, and I've had a lot of, including my parents and others, they finally said, aha, they've had an aha moment, and they now took their money and they're investing, making 8 to 10%. Remember, your network is very important. There's people paying 8 to 10% on private investments. There's people, second mortgages are 12, 14, 18 today. Everything, the higher the return, the higher the risk is. I'm not selling anything besides, I'm just going to tell you what people have done. I have someone that's got 20 million on the streets right now, making on average 14%. Very successful individual. And every time I run into him, he's like, Cliff, I got some money. I'll put out more lending in seconds and that. I introduced him to mortgage, and 6 years later, he tells me he's got 20 million out in the streets lending. So do the math, 20 million at 10, 12%. So same thing as 1 million making 10%. That's 100 grand passively. So now you rent for 50,000. You sold your home for $1 million. You're making 100. You rent for 50. You got 50 profit with no 50 in expenses. Anyway, those are quick math. I just get everyone's attention just because I want everyone to be aware of, like, you know, some people don't like to hear that and want to make the move. It's fine. But there's this time in life that you got to decide, do you want to just travel? Do you want to just, like, depending what you want to do. Some people are like, Cliff, I want to get out of here 4 or 5 months a year. Then we'll rent. For sure, rent. If you're out of here for 5, 6 months, don't own a principal asset. Rent and go and travel. 100 grand a year in passive at 10% can pay for your travel for the whole entire year. But it depends everyone's financial situation. So that's just a quick little off the cuff. We've had fun with that one. Anita and Norm are looking at me, what? That's what I would do.
Yeah. So are there any particular investments that pay off better than others, especially in this market? Right now, it's like any market is a good market for somebody. So maybe we want to explore that.
Amazing. Yeah, we sold a lot of, I call them recession-proof product for the last 20 years, which was buy an asset, a townhome, a condo, a semi, or a house with 20% of your money and borrow 80% and call me in 30 years. That was my line. Hey, invest into a condo or town and call me in 30 years. I never played the flip game. Don't call me in flipping in 2, 3 years. Problem is the last 10, 15 years, everyone played the flip game because they were making a lot of money. I was a big believer of call me in 30 years. Because if you borrow 80 and you put down 20% of your own money, 25 years later, amortization, someone just paid it off for you. So if you bought something for $500,000 and you put 20% down, that's $100,000 down, and you sell that in 30 years for $400,000, how much money did you lose? So you bought it for 500. 25 years later, it's worth 400. How much money did you lose? No, you quadrupled your money because you only put up. What's that? You made 300,000 because you put 100,000 down.
Oh, right.
The bank lent you 80. Tenant paid that off, and you're up. You never lose. It doesn't matter what the value is if you play the long-term game. Unless it goes back down to 20%, that you bought the condo for 5 and it goes down 100,000. It's almost impossible for you to lose money. In real estate, if you hold, if you're playing the flip game, it gets dangerous. You got to account for maintenance and condo fees. There's some cash along the way. People are like, well, it doesn't cover the rent. So I'm still putting money in. Okay, you're out $200-300 a month. I get it. But you're out $200-300 a month now just with Starbucks. Netflix. Oh, you're like gyms. Why don't you have that same key that you have for the gyms as an asset that you own a rental? So putting $200 a month is worth it. So just a reminder. So now you asked the question. So a lot of people built tremendous amount of wealth the last 20 years because of the appreciation on top of that. So now we're in this next low of like, you know, thank God I've always said, you know, all my investors, I've never had an upset investor in 23 years. I've had upset sellers or buyers because I was late but investors were always like, you're right, Cliff, play a hold game. Now, I have a bunch of investors bought in the last 2 years, sure, and they're like, so it's hold game. This market really flipped upside down, but the last 50 years, the market's appreciated consistently, average 5 points. We just had this big spike. So now it's, you know, that's why today, if someone asks me, what do I invest in? I got to go deeper on what's the goal, what's the target, individually based. There's nothing wrong with buying. I have clients now want to buy bulk condos. I have a client that wants to buy 50 units. Condos, 50 units, 30 to 50. I have clients that buy 3 to 5. I know all of us would would consider buying a unit if it was like 60 cents on the dollar. You'd all consider buying one, or 50 cents. And there's a bunch of clients looking that way. So investors are out, but they're just waiting, we're, the low point. So there's going to be some great buys. Condos will be a great buy if you play the long term. This client is playing the long term. I'll wait 10 years for the bounce back and appreciation. I'm okay with that, because if I buy these units at 50, 60 cents on the dollar, the rents will almost cover itself. I'm okay with that appreciation.
And that's interesting, because in this day and age, we're hearing so much about people who are holding condo units or whatever, they're investment properties, and they're complaining because they're maybe losing $300-400 a month as a cash. It's not cash positive, but the point you're making is that over time, that loss is really not a factor.
It's not a loss, because if you only use 20% and you're losing $300 in cash flow, by the end of the year, debt pay down is balanced zero, actually. So you don't lose any money. If there's a 2% appreciation, you're up by 2%. Debt pay down, you're going to be okay. So yes, and then there's some write-offs, etc. But let's face it got really expensive. Condos in Toronto and Ontario got very expensive. You went from 800, 1,000, 15, 16, 1,800 a square foot. So some of the math doesn't make sense. So for sure. And so the question is, a lot of clients are looking at bulk deals. They're looking at, buying some great deals in today's market. A lot of people now are shifting away from buying investment properties, and they're buying, they're just investing in the casual GICs, REITs. There's a lot of, money, opportunities out there. I always tell people, I've been around a long time, that I always say, you gotta invest into anything just like you invest into the stock market. If you're buying a stock, you're buying it based on the asset manager. So when you do that and you lend money and you work with anyone, just know who the group is when you're lending the money. And if you're comfortable that way, there's lots of opportunities that you make 8 to 12% passively on lending, or you buy real estate and you look for a 5 cap rate, multifamily apartment buildings. There's a lot of clients buying in the US. The average price point across the US is, I think, $295, $350, which reminds me, today's a day that you guys stay connected with Anita and Norm. We have a lot of channels and other opportunities. We'll bring, there's a party that's really, they're in the tech space, but they actually have an amazing avenue and property management system that they're, a lot of clients from Canada, I wasn't even aware they're buying, and they run the whole system, PM, leasing, the whole, and their returns are really impressive, because they're buying houses for $250, $295, $350, and the rents are the same in the US. Their team is incredible. Their board, directors, lawyers, accountants, really from one of the major firms. So they just pitched me this deck. I was impressed, and they cover all the cross-border taxes and questions. So if you guys want, I'll send Anita, Norm, Andrew's contact. They just came my way. I just listened today. BMO was here. I'm always meeting people, and I'm like, you know what? Here's clientele, here's people, do your homework, do your due diligence, and then, ask if I would invest. And that's a lot of my investors say, would you go in there? And I'll either say, yes, I have, I will, or I haven't. So, but yeah, we'll provide you some channels. A lot of people are going to the US right now. A lot of people are buying condos here, townhomes, Windsor, London, Stratford, outside of GTA. And a lot of people are coming back and buying in the GTA because of the price point.
Well, that's the thing. There's great opportunities right now in the resale market.
There was an appreciation play for a very long time. People were buying, and they were reassigning, a lot of reassignments. And for sure, there's a valuation and purchase price kind of upside down a bit. But if they can manage that and hold 30 years, they'd be fine.
Listening to, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
What's your gut sort of a square foot? Are we going to see stuff like get to 800?
I've heard of things. I've heard of there's condos out there that you can buy at 700 downtown. We have a lot of off market. You can't build it. You can't build it for 1,000. Builders can't build it for 1,000.
Nobody's building it.
No, so we got to, no one's going to build for the next couple of years. Correct. Correct.
And so if you could pick it up for less than you can buy it. I remember that in 89.
That's exactly it.
At 89, 90, we were looking at stuff thinking, you can't build that for that. So either
building costs are gonna drop like a stone,
which is not going to.
prices are going up. So we bought, and prices did go up.
And that's, we all do that. And it was
But
like
it's
the
gotta
U.S.
be- You're right, it's long-term.
It's long term. 2008 and 2009, we all said, oh, could have in the U.S.
Warren
Yeah.
Buffett doesn't flip stocks,
No,
but he did okay.
he's done okay. He knows what he's doing.
So are we looking possibly at, we're either entering into the bottom of the trough, or perhaps we're at the bottom of the trough, and so according to some of the mucky mucks like Benjamin Tal of CIBC, who says that with this, the drop in valuation, we're going to see a lot of inventory that's going to eventually be soaked up because nothing's being built.
We're going to have a
That will then
shortage.
create a vacuum, and that
But they're also saying that that the population growth has not kept up to the pace, to the generation before.
right.
So that even though that may be the case initially, that if you fast forward to a decade or two from now, that you're gonna have a lot of vacancies because people are just not having babies and we don't know
But-
what we're doing in terms of, foreign ownership.
I think though that the immigration rates are still pretty
Agreed.
high and
They'll have that
are
open,
continuing
yeah.
to be, and that will continue to build demand. And so when this pile of empty stuff gets bought out, there will be nothing then for people to buy, which will create demand, and prices will start to go up again. All I'm referring to is the fact that perhaps we're kind of
Yeah,
entering
it's going to take a few
lower
years,
trough
but
in
it's,
time.
Isn't a lot of the current stuff 500, 550 square foot boxes though, that families can't?
That's right. So
No, but that's a good point. The one product that's struggling right now are the studio one bedrooms.
You don't wanna buy that probably.
no.
I have a client that might buy 20 of those because they can get them all the way down to X, and the rent's going to be $2,200, but they picked it up for 400 or four. Like, so if the math makes sense, see, some of the investors are all about math. Math doesn't lie. And people got on the emotional roller coaster, and that's where it gets sensitive. It's like, I'm buying on appreciation. And if you just go to the fundamentals, math doesn't lie. There's going to be demand for renting always. People don't, we run a 2-3% vacancy rate, I think. So, but yeah, that right now in the market though, they're competing with one bedroom. So that becomes an issue because your one bedrooms are looking like a better deal, and someone would rather buy one bedroom, and that someone that bought 9 years ago is going to the market today. They can afford to sell their one bedroom at X amount of square foot. That's the same cost as a studio that just sold 2 years ago. So that's what we're running into right now.
There may also be a change in lifestyle too if people are not having children as much, and that's happening a lot in Asia, where the smaller properties, people are just buying up smaller properties. They don't intend to have families. And there may be that shift here at some point.
It's funny because like my kids, when I talk to my kids, like they're not interested in big properties, and like they're just in and out. Like, so yeah, the new gen thinks completely different.
Right now in this current market, people want bigger 2+ bedrooms, but that may not be down the road.
So getting back to the issue of people with equity, and let's say people of my generation.
Sure.
What about maybe they don't have the stomach for buying a condo, getting into like a rental, becoming a landlord, or so we've got other vehicles people could look at that could be beneficial and maybe a little less stress, maybe a REIT, or what else could one consider?
Yeah, they're lending private. They are playing the stock market. They're buying cryptocurrency. The point to that question about your principal asset, like if you have a principal home that's worth $1 million, I've had a lot of clients, and I would consider this, and a lot of clients 15 years ago, 20 years ago, their home was worth $600,000 and they owed $200,000, and they borrowed another $200,000, bumped that mortgage up to $400,000, and they took the $200,000 and they went and bought 4 condos. And you talk to them now, that was the best move they've ever done. Because those condos at 20% down, it was like 80,000 down or 40,000 at the time, can't remember the price points, allow them to buy some condos. Those went up in appreciation. Those were paid down debt. That $200,000 that they put on their principal home made them probably 900,000 in a 7-year window. So, like, you know, a lot of people don't like to refinance their principal home. I get it. But you can't, if your day-to-day income is not allowing you to, you know, use or borrow or leverage, then that could be an asset to leverage. And with a very, very conservative approach, you just want to do the math. Like, as long as you're playing the long-term game, someone's paying off that line of credit. Like at one time, the line of credits, the new mortgage, that rent was covering all of that. Are we heading that way? If we start to get a couple more drops in interest rate, and you can connect with a really good property investment, you could almost be back to break-even cash flow, and we haven't seen that in a very long time. So, some good questions. So, lots of other avenues I can get into. I mean, there's a lot of joint ventures. People go in together, 2 or 3 families. They buy together. You know, I've never really promoted the flip game. I'm not in that space, but there's people that have borrowed money to go run a business and start renovating and flipping. Passive income is big now. A lot of people like the passive income and no tenants, no headaches.
For instance, a REIT would, instance, maybe, and I'm not sure how familiar people here may be with the term REIT, real estate investment. Real estate investment trust is something that's like, consider it like a mutual fund, where you're investing in real estate, but you're spreading your risk.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's right. There's some in the stock market. Like if you really want to talk to your financial advisor, they'll talk to you about some investments that are spread only in real estate. And in some cases, you can go directly to some of those REITs. Most of them are like, it's like the teachers' pensions. They invest in the solid, purpose-built rentals, and these clients will pay a yield of 6 to 8%. So whatever you invest, you're getting 6 to 8%. Yeah, do your homework and know their history, but yeah, there's I mean, we can talk about it offline anytime, but I have a handful of clients that you guys can meet, and they're always looking for money. This is how these towers get built and everything else gets built. It's OPM, other people's money, and everyone, investors come in on it. So lots of ways.
There are a lot of different vehicles.
A lot of different vehicles.
And
ADUs, for instance.
ADUs is another big one.
Who's ever heard of the term ADU? I can't even remember. Cliff, you're going to have to
Additional
tell me.
dwelling units.
It's a term we don't use in Toronto.
A move with some people who have owned their home for, say, 30, 40 years, and their kid owns a home, and they're building garden suites. So they're taking money out of the equity of their home, building a garden suite, and selling their property and traveling or doing whatever and living in their kid's backyard, which is awesome. And now, if you have a couple of kids, it gets tricky, but they're going to get that money anyway. Yeah. You just increase the value of their home because now they have a garden suite on their property as well. But you've also made life easier for yourself. So, and you've freed up the rest of the equity.
That's like going to renting. That's like selling and renting. But that ADU, a lot of people are just popping in a garden suite or an ADU, and you can build those for call it $300,000 to $400,000 and collect $3,000 to $4,000. So that's a pretty good cash flow place. So basically, there's again, if you want to get into that, we can have someone that really in the company, Corcoran, he specializes in will. He's done it himself. He's so talented. He's studied the market. He knows the lot sizes. Every city district is different and unique, but he'll give you the basics of it. But basically, people that have a certain lot size, you're allowed to put an additional dwelling of up to 20, 30% of your square footage. Call it 400, 500 square feet, and you just tie into your services, and now you can use that as a passive income, a rental, or like Donna said, you move into that unit. So there's always a way to get into building wealth through real estate. It's coming to events like this and networking like this. And when I start to talk about clients that, because I have a lot of people will still challenge me today, and they're like, yeah, but, and then, I have the one that says, yeah, I use my student credit card, and now this gentleman has 2,000 units.
And we had a discussion the other day about no money down.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated at because, we usually think about no money down as someone maybe doing a vendor take-back mortgage or something like that, where it's that scenario. But you were counting. I mean, I actually really couldn't count a keep up with your math on that. But you were going on about how these people could buy and essentially were no money down. And so that's a great way of looking at potential.
I had a
things.
lot of clients that, and they still do that. In all levels, more zeros, less zeros, it's the same rule of thumb. So this might happen in this condo market. So if you really time the real estate market and there's a bit of an appreciation and you buy today's pricing with a 2-year closing. So for example, I had clients that would buy a $450,000 condo early on. And 2-3 years later, the value goes to $600,000. The banks are appraising that new amount of $600,000. They give you 80 loan of value on that 600. So they give you a mortgage of 400. So you bought that with no money down. It's completely 100% financed. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is buying an asset, again, a commercial building. It happens a lot with commercial. A lot of us have done, and a lot of these deals I've been involved, I've done it. And with partners or myself or my clients, and I learned they'll buy a vacant commercial building. And what they'll do is there's multi-units, and let's just use, 50% of the commercial is vacant. And you're buying that commercial building at current rent roll and current cap rate. So if the building is worth $2 million with the existing tenants, the bank will borrow at 6 or 7% cap rate. I'm getting to numbers, and we won't get it caught up into numbers. But bottom line, if you can buy that and fill the remaining units prior to closing, the bank will lend you 70%, usually commercial 70 or 60, on the new rent roll and give you a mortgage on that. And if you bought it at the actual and you've increased the value by $2 million with the new rents, you can buy those real estate assets with no money down.
Are you talking about new construction commercial or
No,
not necessarily?
Existing,
Okay.
probably existing that's kind of like, sitting vacant and you go in, you need good recourse. You need good credits. There's a bit of everything else too.
You have to have the resources to close.
It's a good question. You need the means to close, you're right. You got to be careful with commercial. Yeah, you got to be careful with commercial. Commercial will sit a year vacant. Residential never sits longer than a month vacant. So a friend of mine, I sat next to him, he owns 150 rentals. And I said to him, James, at my broker course, I'm like, James, why haven't you bought commercial? He goes, here's why, Cliff. In a depression, you can offer that space for lease at $0 and no one's coming in. In a depression, residential rent goes up because everyone's selling and they got to rent. So it's kind of like an aha moment in the residential versus commercial. So everything has pros and cons. There is a point, someone had mentioned something, the rents, depending, nothing is vacant on Avenue and Bloor. But yeah, certain pockets are sitting vacant and a lot of shops are opening and closing. It's always a cycle. Restaurants, gyms are very tough to finance. So commercial is a whole different animal. If you've never really been in the investment space, owning commercial or residential, and this is a first, I would jump into residential. This is my opinion. Multifamily, maybe a fourplex, a duplex.
Is it more difficult to secure financing for commercial?
Commercial is
Yeah.
more secure, difficult.
Do you think there's any possibility of the housing shortage that Toronto's experiencing in particular, that some of these smaller units might be somehow purchased, let's say, by federal government or the provincial government, with all these smaller units that are on the market? Do you think they're that, because we have to build, we do have a housing shortage, I'm just wondering.
Do we have a housing shortage?
Well, in terms of the home
Affordability.
I think we have an affordability. I don't think we have 15 months of inventory right now in resale, not including all the new dev. So I don't think we have a housing shortage.
Could the existing buildings could somehow fill that gap for homelessness as well?
Yeah, I would have no idea if they're going to step in and write a check. It's a good question. I think if that's the mindset, they should just, in the beginning, not get involved, because that's what happened to the pricing. Like each developer that builds a tower, before they go shovel in the ground, they're into at $80,000 a door or $100,000 a door, just in development charges. That used to be 10,000. Got creeped up to 80,000 a door. So that's very expensive for a developer. That gets passed on to the consumer. So if they work on that, which I think is going to happen, their HST just kicked in yesterday for first-time buyers. I
Sounds
think
like
development
that's in the works,
credits are
yeah.
going to happen because that's got to be passed on to the consumer. That's how you get the affordable housing back in. Is development charges have to go.
They're also speaking about the rapidity, how rapid they have to be built.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. The average development, it takes 10 years by the time you buy a piece of land to get it ready. That's too long.
When you know, if you've got say, for example, you got a HELOC or something like that,
Correct.
you can slice off a section of that HELOC and borrow that money on the HELOC is fully deductible.
Correct.
Have no mortgage.
Correct.
Or even in some cases where you might have a minimal mortgage, you can work out a way to pay that off and then re-borrow, now your mortgage is deductible.
Correct.
You can borrow that, you wanna go 60%, 50% be conservative equity, that's now investable in a REIT or whatever else you wanna do, and you get that deduction, so now your mortgage is deductible.
So that was exactly what I wanted to,
Kind of a key point when we're looking at investment return.
yeah,
If you're accessing that capital, it's a fully deductible expense.
right.
You're getting capital, you're getting CCA? No, you're not getting CCA, but you're getting, if you are getting the deduction on the interest that you're borrowing. And I actually did that once with a HELOC that I had, where I sliced off, called up the bank, said, I want to buy this property, but I want to I don't want to go through the hassle and get the mortgage, because it was a foreign mortgage, it's a hassle. So
Yeah,
I
just use your own HELOC.
sliced off.
You can write it off.
Create a new HELOC for me, still slice and dice it.
Correct.
Whatever you want, and then I took that credit line and bought the property, and that made that part of the HELOC deductible.
So what you're really
Home-
talking about
HELOC, home
leveraging.
equity line of credit.
So it's like a first mortgage, but you can slice it up however you want.
Yeah, look, so that's a good point. And a lot of people, it's basically putting a line of credit on your home or refinancing it. HELOC is a line of credit, and some people would say, do I just refinance it and start a new mortgage? There's two options, but HELOC's pretty good. You have a line of credit, that way you can pay it off anytime. The nice thing is you get to write that off. So that's a very important point. A lot of people will,
Regardless of what you use it for.
Well, if you buy a Ferrari, no, but
yeah,
it was an investment, like if you're buying.
Go to
if you buy
expensive
an investment-
restaurants and
If you're gonna buy
trips.
an investment property, you're gonna buy one of these.
investment properties. Yes, yes, you get to write off. Correct. Yes, you can. There's a portion of that you can. But it's funny because I have a lot of clients that I'll run into that and they're like, yeah, I had a refinance and I put a pool in the backyard. And I'm like, but you won't refinance to buy a rental property. That rental property should pay for the pool. So it's a mindset switch that people refinance to buy a car, refinance to build a home, refinance. You know, I have people refinance to build a cottage. It's a no-no in my eyes. Again, until you, you know, are in a position that you can pay for that cash. Refinance your property to buy an asset that's making you money is the right way to go. And you can write off, it's a deductible, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, listen, isn't it wow? I love the wow. Like, you know, I
didn't even know what a HELOC was, and I actually have one.
well, a good thing is
I have the potential to use it. Yes.
and
Yeah.
and
I had no idea.
And so a HELOC will be based on a interest rate if you decide to use that money. It's like a bank account full of money sitting there based on the value of your home that's set up when you take out a mortgage or arrange with the financing. And if you choose to use that credit that's there, it's going to cost you X amount of interest, usually fairly reasonable. Yeah. So the point is, you take that money, you can leverage it into another investment that's going to bring you a higher rate of return. Is ideally the idea, rather than buying a Ferrari or going out for expensive dinners. But the point of the matter is, it's another avenue one can use that's available to you as a homeowner that doesn't really, it can be a low risk opportunity, and it doesn't take away from the value of your home. It can be a nice way of perhaps generating income if you have good advice on where to invest that money.
yeah, and what I love is
What's that called?
That's a HELOC.
Home equity line of credit.
LOC, L-O-C.
There will be a test of all the anagrams at the end.
So then, whatever the remainder of that use, you get a mortgage on. those payments are tax deductible.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And so hopefully you'll have invested in something that will give you a spread, in other words, between the interest you're paying on that versus what you're getting from the investment you made.
you don't
And you're
have to
making a little
pay.
money.
So it pays for itself.
You got to pay it
What I
and
love
gives you a
about this
profit.
is why, I've been doing this for 23 years, and I still love that there's a wow factor. Because this is what we need to do as realtors, is bring this value to your consumers, not just try to sell you something. And I love that there's a bit of a wow factor today, because a lot of us are not aware of that. Because we're busy in our day-to-day jobs, that we're not aware of that. So I've learned that a very long time ago, because I'm in the biz. So that's great. I'm glad we
Clearly,
brought that
Anita
up.
and I haven't been of enough value to you guys, because this is not, clearly. So-
This is why we were meant to be to meet,
is
because it's
why
never
we're
too
doing
late. Now, the good thing about your heat lock is I'm glad you weren't aware of it, because you would have probably used it. Well, now is the right time to think about using it, because it could be the right time. Listen, at the end of the day, it's risk tolerance. I've had people that have had heat locks forever and ever and ever, and they would never use it. So there's clients of mine that will never touch their principal residence.
And that's the whole thing. Why we thought this was a useful discussion is because many of us have homes. We've maybe paid off our mortgage or would like to pay off our mortgage, but there's money sitting there. But we get conservative, and this is a very valuable asset. So the last thing you want to do is put it to risk. But at the same time, it's sitting there, really not doing much. And as you said, it's
Could be a
pointed out,
liability. Could be a liability. Some would argue that, but
can be a liability, and there's ways of taking and using
Spend
it.
so much of our lives when we buy our first house.
Yeah.
Every month for 30 years, we're getting closer. And then when you finally pay it off, the idea of somehow changing any of that,
Yeah.
when you think you're all good,
Free and clear.
is just really emotional for people.
yeah, and it doesn't make sense, because you wait 30 years. Like the client of mine that weighed in that 400, he says, Cliff, I'm gonna wait. I got to pay off my house so that I can send my 2 kids to school. This is just a fun exercise, like 50. I was a little like aggressive, full disclosure, and I did all these things, by the way. And I've lucked out here and there, like I've refinanced, and I was just always like, I'm doing it. I'll start from scratch. I started from no money. I'll just start again. That was my mindset. But I was very fortunate to be in a space that I understood really well, so I had no problem putting line of credits. I've had assets where I'll give you an example. I bought an asset. Here's a cool one. I don't like to share my own stories, but it's important. They're simple stories. I bought a fourplex for $180,000 in Cambridge 17 years ago or 15 years ago. I sold it last year for $850, and I owe $695 on it, but I bought it for $150. I owe $695 and sold it for $800. So $500,000 of that were new lines and new money that I borrowed on that building to go buy other assets. But that $500,000 allowed me to buy another $5-10 million of real estate. So you got to stomach that and understand that was a fourplex. So I always had 4 tenants. So anyway, that's kind of some of the stories that I like to share, because it's just understanding that if you want to really invest in real estate, be around great accountants, realtors, lawyers. They're all doing it. They all built a lot of wealth through real estate. What property should I buy? People talk about this all the time. So singles, pre-construction, multifamily, passive income, commercial, resale, international opportunities. So we're kind of touching up on all of them. Basically, we'll go through the slides now as you talk normal. You'll see pros and cons on each one. So if you have a question on that, maybe we'll let you guys ask. But really, there's pros and cons of buying singles versus a condo versus commercial. So we kind of touched up on it.
I've forgotten the question. So.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. I think just in terms of a timeline, if we're thinking maybe a short timeline for seniors, thinking, well, buying an investment property, so with that scenario, I think your advice would be to rent, right? Mm-hmm. So sell, rent, and then move that money into passive investments, safe investments. And what that does is it generates an income.
Yeah.
And because you've already generated a sizable amount, that becomes a valuable asset. It can pay you for a lifestyle that perhaps you were limited because here you are stuck in this house. I think of your dad, no, in nothing but the best way, but he's got a fantastic asset there. He could put an ADU in that thing in no time flat, and you guys could move in. But
He's not doing it, eh?
but I
Yeah, listen, some of the, listen, it's not going to happen. Some people are just, you're not going to get there. But it's not for everyone. It's just for the next generation or friends. Someone might consider doing that. And I go back to what's in it for that client or that person. Some people don't want change. So I just bring it up when someone's like, I want to start vacationing. I don't make enough. This retirement, this pension, this. And that's when I go deep and say, wait a second. There's an out here. If you're not making enough to enjoy life, but you own a $2 million asset, doesn't make sense. Okay? Let's have a time out here. What do you mean? Well, let's just think about it. You are frustrated because there's not enough, but you're sitting on this house. Sell the damn house, make 10%, 200 grand a year. You could go travel every friggin' month. Is that amazing? But and then, well, I gotta go somewhere. Yeah, you go. I'm not renting.
What about multifamily properties?
Multifamilies are great. Like the thing about multifamily, I talk to my kids and there's people like, I can't get into the market. Yes, you can. 4 friends go in and buy multifamily and all of you put in 50 grand or 100 grand or move into one apartment and rent the other 3. Like, so there's always ways, come on in. Yeah, no, all good. So multifamilies are great. You have 4 headaches in one building, 6 headaches in one building, single detached, 1 tenant. So pros and cons. Always cash flow in multifamilies. There's always cash flow.
There are incentives right now to renovate,
Correct.
to create more housing.
Correct.
So, yeah.
And the cool thing about multifamily is that you're limiting your risk.
Correct. Correct.
You know, you can have a basement suite in your house, and if that place is vacant, you're losing that only source of income. If you invest in a multifamily unit, one person leaves, you're at vacant, you still have the other
Unlikely
income
they'd all leave at the
coming
same
in.
time, unless you
exactly.
really had a problem.
They're not leaving all at the same time.
Does a reverse mortgage have a place in this conversation?
Yes, it does. Yeah, yeah.
What's the tax benefit for the multifamily and for them?
Good question.
Listen, I mean, the minute you get into buying a rental property, savvy investors will tell you, you get the write off the gas because you had to go to the house. Now, you can't write off all the gas and your lawnmower, but you need a lawnmower. Well, the lawnmower you bought for your house can cut the multifamily property. Like, there's benefits. Like, you don't abuse it. It's tax. Yeah, there's some benefits on the tax side.
And there are incentives too for
Incentives,
that,
yeah.
especially in Toronto. They're encouraging that kind of investment now because they want to get that the middle, what's it called, the middle ground, whatever, in between single family homes and big multiplexes. So the 4 units and up kind of thing.
And I'm involved, and I'm always trying to keep up with everything. But every day things are coming up, so it's just staying in tune and networking and reaching out. But I mean, I always just say, start with the basics if you haven't got into the real estate, and figure what your risk tolerance is. Find a way to get it. There's always a way to get into it, and long term. Again, back to Norman's question, I think it's been more geared towards maybe someone that's, baby boomer, they're on their way out, they want to exit, they want to travel, and they want to retire. That I would consider, the question I ask is, what do you really want in life? And
To that point, for instance, I mean, if you have a child coming out of university or kids coming out of university you could take your HELOC and buy a house for them, and it wouldn't even affect you're not selling your house to do so. You're using the equity and an opportunity. You could do that to help finance the purchase of a house.
I did forget what I was saying earlier, and now I got it. So my client wanted to pay off his house to pay for his kid's school. He's like, I got to pay off this house so when they hit university, I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense. Because when you pay off the house, you're going to save $2,000 in payments that you're paying today. He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's 24 grand a year in savings. Well, you have 2 kids, that's not enough. I got an idea for you. Why don't we whiteboard this? And I'm a whiteboard. We don't have a whiteboard in this office. I got to get a few whiteboards. I'm like, let's whiteboard this. And this is a true story. And I didn't know what I learn as I go, and I was always a little. So I grabbed the marker. I'm like, your house is worth 400. I think he owed 80,000, but we can pull out 160,000. So if we take out 160,000, we can fly to Vegas and put it all on black and gamble, or red, roulette, inside joke. Or we take 160 and we buy a couple units. Anyway, the true story is he bought 2 units or 3. They all went up in value. After 1 year, he sold 1, and that paid for the 2 kids' university. So Gary.
And that's a short play.
That's a short
Right,
play. He kept
that's
3
not a long
others.
play.
It's just stories like that I just share because that paid for the school, not trying to pay off your principal mortgage, right?
And also, I don't think we have to be always thinking about the Toronto market. Toronto market is a difficult market right now, but there are other markets in Canada that are actually thriving and doing much, much better. That we don't have to be limited to just the Toronto or Vancouver market, where we think that it used to be a great market. There still are good markets. And
Math doesn't lie, and emotional investors of mine don't. They want to come back into Toronto because they want a great deal and they know appreciation. But I just had a client now that bought 5 townhomes in Stratford for each of their kids.
Are there any particular things that are specific to, if, let's say, because, cottage country is good value right now, that if you bought a cottage as an investment, you're going to rent it out. Is that something are there any benefits to that other than just getting the rent?
No.
Okay.
A friend of mine called me. And said, Cliff, can you talk to so-and-so? I said, sure. She calls me and she says, Cliff, and I do this all the time. Feel free to get on the phone with Norm and Anita and hop on a call. Like, I love that stuff. And she's like, Cliff, I want to buy my first investment property. And I'm being told I should go in on splits on this cottage. And I'm listening going, and then I know I get to use it. And then I'm like, and I can rent it out. I'm like, it's not going to happen. You only rent out prime time is 12 weeks a year. You're going to want a prime time July, August, or you're going to go November. So now you lose 2-3 weeks because you're dividing by three of you. And then one rental, Airbnb, one party, one weekend, you got to spend $10,000 on the deck that they damaged. So absolutely not. Like Airbnb is in cottage rental is very, very short. It's again, yes, people have had that massive appreciation. So everything has pros and cons, but as a rental income, buying a cottage is not. Math doesn't work. You got to go through all that. But again, cash ROI, your return on your investment and see, a lot of people, they don't value their time. So the amount of calls and dealing with the cleaners, Airbnbs in and out, cleaners, toilet paper, this and reviews and checkouts, like there's a bit of work there. And why not just buy a rental and have someone pay you $2,000 a month, every month, and you're done. Especially if you've never had, this is this person's first investment. So I'm like, you're not going to cottage. Because I always talk to people like, if you're my daughter, you're my friend, it's a no. And I'm a realtor, and I'm not representing you on that. I'm not selling you that because that's not the right investment. So I don't want to support that. I have some really good conversations with clients that way. Like, why don't you ask me if I'm a realtor, but I sell you that as investment? That's a no. So I don't want to sell you that. It doesn't make sense because I know that you don't own a single property investment. So that's not the first one to go at.
I've been following as much as I can here, and our story, my wife and I's story, we have a free interior house.
Okay.
2.4, 2.5 in that
Okay.
range. And we're thinking at some point, what are we going to do? And the idea of selling and renting, I'm getting the feeling, I'm 70 and I was just mowing down work-wise, and we want to travel. I actually nearly bought an RV to go across and travel with.
I can sell you an RV. Can we show you our RV we bought for the company? It's a 45-foot RV we wrapped for Corcoran. So look for it. We're bringing it down through summer. Yeah, it's amazing, by the way. There it is there. So keep going.
Well, the one I was looking at was 25 feet, made in Winkler, Manitoba.
Yeah.
Great.
Really
Anyway,
exists.
but I get the feeling that for our situation, we have a 27-year-old son, trying to figure out what he wants to do, but I think I'm getting, for us, if we sold the house for 2.4, something like that, whatever we got, then we invest that money and whatever interest we get, we find a place to rent that's really nice. I think we want to get out of the city because it's getting a bit crazy. But then we don't know where we want to go. Maybe up north, someplace with some water.
You want to be near the good hospitals, though.
But we want
Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. That's absolutely true.
That's absolutely true.
I mean, take whatever we get for that house and invest that, or rent and then invest the money and live off the income and travel.
That's the idea.
So I love that you shared your story, because I love that you shared that story and you gave us real numbers to work with.
Yeah.
So if we are one-on-one and we know each other really well and you're asking me what to do, and now I know what you want to do, travel, RV maybe, but I'm telling you to go sell that home right away.
Yeah.
And at 10%, $240,000 you make passively a year if you get 10% on that money.
That would be the interest we make
Correct.
when we put the money.
I'm just using a 10% if used. So let's go conservative, because last year or two there was a 5% GIC was hitting 5%. So half of that now, you make 120 a year passively sitting in a GIC, the most conservative RSP. Now it's down to GIC. Now it's down to 4%. But the point is making 120 passively and renting for 60 grand out of town. Look at how much far advanced you are. You have no tax, no insurance, no maintenance, no roofs, nada. So that's why I'm all in on that story. Yes, you should be doing that. And then I hear you might move out of the city and go, so for sure. And then I hear, well, we don't even know where we want to go. That's why you go rent, because then you can flip around. And I would 100% think about buying that RV and doing that thing across the US. We don't get taught enough to do what we love to do. We get taught, go to school, get debt, pay off the house, and then, retire. Well, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to say that, but shouldn't it be the opposite? Like, we should enjoy life. I always say this, like, I'm really very unique and I think different, and why don't we just enjoy life, play, and then go to work at 55, 60? Why do we try to enjoy life when we can't walk? Like, so for sure, sell your home, buy that motorhome, go enjoy, because you won't run out of money if you are smart about it. Sitting with 2.4 million, I'm glad you shared that number, sitting there vacant. Sitting no debt. So that I'm doubling down on that, because I can feel that you want to enjoy work. You shouldn't be working right now. If you're working still, you should be retired. Maybe it's in the blood, so you can work while you're in that motorhome everywhere and consult. So lots of ways to think about it.
Marketing would still say, like, don't hold, sell if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, so that's a good question. Do you do that now or wait till the bounce back? You do it based on your timing. You don't do it on the market. Never play the market. It's your values based on your timing in life, because you wait for that bounce back. You might be competing with a bunch of homes. You might have a higher interest rate. You might have lost on an opportunity. Rent might be higher. So you buy high, you sell high, you buy high, you sell low, you buy low. So if you're buying and selling, it's irrelevant. Personally, your lifestyle, you shouldn't worry about that, especially with that type of situation, because you probably bought the house for $80,000.
But if you bought,
anyway,
if you have a paid off mortgage at this
I'm
point,
exaggerating.
you bought it a long time ago.
Thanks for
so
sharing those
you built a lot
numbers
of
and
it.
using that real scenario, because it helps people, put it to perspective. But that's what I would do.
For younger people, it's a different scenario, it's a different season, so you're building, but.
That's right. Different seasons.
Different seasons for everybody, and it makes sense to own real estate at certain points in your life.
Sure.
And even if it does cost you a little more, there are
Correct.
occasions where that is a forced
Correct.
savings and you make that payment. Because
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
if everyone actually did save the money and rented, you could make a strong argument that you are better off, but people don't do that, Jim.
Correct.
They don't. So,
No, some good points here. Seasons. It's great.
and then I guess, we have a lot of young people here too, but it changes it. And it's a little bit like we talked about before. With owning real estate, it's different because you don't mark to market like we talked about.
Yeah.
Real estate. Whereas in your stock market portfolio, you see it every day. You know if it's going up or down. But when you're young, you own stocks and you don't own any bonds. But when you're 70, you sell your stocks and you own bonds. Because there's a season for that. You can't ride the ups and downs.
Okay.
You can't.
We didn't get into cap rates, but we can talk about this really quick, which is really the money that you invest. And if you buy a property free and clear, what return do you make? So if you buy something for $1 million and you're collecting $50,000 in rent, you take that $50,000 divided by your million, it gives you a percentage, and that's what a cap rate is. So it's basically your profit divided by your investment times 100. So I can talk about that offline.
And just quickly, Cliff, on that, a higher cap rate is better or a lower cap rate is better?
So it's a good question, a higher cap rate.
So if
that
someone
means
says a cap rate like
Yeah.
of 8 or 9, that's
jump.
probably impossible,
You're buying
right?
that. You're buying that right away. But there, yeah, correct.
So
Low cap.
interesting things to talk about there.
Correct. High cap rate is a great return on your investment. So 8, 7, 8, 9% is what everyone would like. You're not finding cap rates of that high. People buy apartment buildings at 4 cap rate because it's a long-term steady. So we talked a bit about this. Traditional pensions, case study. Yeah, we talked about this. We talked a bit about this, like selling your property and then investing some of it in the REIT and then generating X amount. So it's kind of using that excess cash. I think we can flip a few more.
And that's probably a good scenario.
Sorry?
An alternative scenario for you as well is like, some people don't like the idea of renting because if someone decides to sell, now you're moving. So,
Correct.
right, so it's not necessarily a guarantee how long you can stay there. So if you were to sell a $2.5 million home, that's if you're buying outside Toronto, you could buy a nice condo maybe for 7,
Cambridge.
whatever, depending on where
Stratford.
you want to live. But you want resources, the older you get, for sure, close by, and invest the rest.
Correct.
You're still investing
Sure,
1.8
you could do
or
that.
something like that.
You can buy something for $500,000 or something. You're right. Yeah.
Which is that similar scenario you just showed.
But if you're not sure where you want to end up, I'd go rent in Aurelia or up north in Muskoka or Port Severn or Stratford or Grand Bend or so. And then property management's always been a very sensitive topic in investments. People are always, I don't want to deal with tenants. That's the number one stress I've always been asked. So I always say you don't need to deal with tenants. That's why there's property management. They charge you 5 to 7%. And it's worth $60, $70 a month, and they deal with the headaches. So property management is your partner, so you don't have to deal with tenants. Yeah, I talked about a recession proof that you're just debt pay down, call me in 30 years and it'll pay itself off. There's lots of tax advantages when you leverage it and you add a heat lock.
Cliff, I'll be calling you at 100.
And there is.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.